Okay, good morning. Welcome officially to Thursday. How are you feeling? Hey, yeah, I know you kind of dug deep for that for me, but I still appreciate it. How we doing? Okay?
Yeah, I'm very good.
Yeah? So?
Yeah,
Yeah.
almost there.
Almost there.
Already.
One more day, and then it's a long weekend.
Yep.
Then it's a long weekend, so don't forget that. You get Monday off. All right, so let's jump in here. That's not what I want to show you. This is what I want to show you here. There we go. Right, so yesterday we finished talking about Jordan Peterson and his arguments, and we'll leave him behind. But we will just quickly review what we talked about in advertising, right? So we said that advertising is an important medium for transmitting social messages, right? Because we are exposed to it all the time, right? We see it in front of our YouTube videos, we see it in social media. If anyone actually watches regular TV, you'll definitely see ads. If you're waiting for the SkyTrain, you'll see ads. We are kind of advertised to and sold to very frequently, right? All the time. And so it's kind of worth paying attention to what messages are getting sent with that advertising because it's so ubiquitous. It's everywhere, right? It is literally everywhere. And so I'll just jump ahead here. We talked about some social messaging yesterday in toys, right? We looked at these toys and said, well, these are kind of stereotypically boy toys. I know that girls can play with them too, and sometimes they do, but these are kind of marketed to boys. They're made for boys, and they have certain kind of messages in them, right? What were some of those messages we said? Hey, morning, Crazy House. What were some of the messages we said were transmitted in these toys? Chen, give me one.
Job.
Right? So there's some sort of messages about what maybe are appropriate or desirable jobs for men. And what are those jobs like?
Physical job.
Yeah, there's a physical element to them. I think you said yesterday there was kind of a danger element to them, right? Avi, what about you? What kind of messages are being sent through these toys? What are boys learning from these toys?
That they're supposed to be strong and tough.
Okay. What makes you say that?
Like the action figures, it's all like strong characters and superheroes.
Yeah.
And then like the police and the guns.
Yeah. There's a lot of kind of strength and personal power, right? So all of those superheroes are muscular and ripped, but they also have superpowers. They're stronger than the rest of us, right? And in the same way, the police and the military are stronger than the rest of us as well, right? They're allowed to walk around with guns and tasers, unless you go to the United States, and then everybody gets to walk around with guns and tasers. But but the police and the military, they are stronger than us, right? And so boys are kind of trained to, I guess, think about themselves in this way, or to desire to maybe have power over others, or just to be powerful in general. What else? Arena, what else is happening here? Right? So there's kind of we talked about kind of bravery and heroism maybe, right? And that was kind of a sharp contrast to what we saw with some of the girl toys, right? Because Crazio, what do you see here with these girls' toys? What are girls being taught when they play with these?
Others and on the customer, it's just kind of like being the job which society wants the future to be.
Yeah, exactly. So young men were kind of getting messages about their role in society and what sort of ideal jobs they might have later, and young girls are getting the same message, but they're getting told, well, this is maybe what you should be focusing on, right? We're training girls to be mothers. We're training them to take care of little babies, right? What else are we getting from this, Arena? What else are we getting?
Also beautiful and stylish.
Yeah, right. Kind of a focus on girls' appearance, right? They need to be beautiful. Good morning. They need to be beautiful. They need to be stylish, right, in some way. And so we see Barbie, who has lots of different outfits. We see a little makeup table here. Kind of a focus on how girls look, right? And that was kind of interesting because we said when we moved on to other types of products, we saw that sometimes they were gendered as well, right? And even though, yes, both, men and women can both eat these foods, we said these are kind of associated with women usually, right? And why was that? Anna, why was that?
Because of the sweet, like there is actually more sweet.
Right? So there's kind of a stereotype that women like their sweet things, right? Their chocolate or their ice cream or whatever it might be, right? There's that kind of idea. Mir, why else might these be considered sort of girl foods or foods for women?
Knowledge.
Yeah. One sec. What were you gonna say?
They're decorated, they're all decorated.
Oh.
Have like effects.
That's an interesting point. Yeah, they're kind of if you worked in the restaurant industry, they would call it presentation, right? There's a lot of presentation here, right? There's stuff hanging on the drinks, and there's stuff sprinkled on the salad, and it all looks very artful and nice. Whereas the man foods are kind of more basic, right? That's just a plate of bacon, right? There's no presentation. It doesn't look fancy, but boy, does that ever look good. So yeah, that's something too, and we didn't catch that yesterday, but that's a good catch, Mir. There's kind of more, they're fancier, right? They're kind of more the presentation value. Oh wait, one more thing, David. Why else did we say that these are foods that are kind of associated with women?
Well, because some effect like benefit, I guess.
They're delicate.
Benefit.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, from the food, like women tend to have tendency to take unhealthy ones.
Right. We kind of we kind of made a connection there yesterday between the idea that because there's so much focus on women's appearance, they tend to be more health conscious, right? They tend to be kind of watching their figure or watching their weight, and so sometimes healthier foods are kind of marketed to women first because I think advertisers feel that women will be more conscious of that sort of thing, right? And again, the chocolate cake doesn't really fit there, but everybody likes cake, don't they? Yeah, of course, right? So the man foods we said were a little bit different, and again, of course, everybody can eat these foods and probably does, but it's a little bit different, right? There's different kinds of foods here. Why are these foods associated with men? Anna, what do you think?
I don't think the whiskey has like a strong taste.
Right? So the apple teenies that we saw in the last slide, those are kind of a soft, fruity, fun drink. But whiskey is not a fun drink, right? Whiskey is badass. It's strong. It's tough. When we see what do we see in movies when somebody has a whiskey and they're kind of a wimpy character? What do? Sometimes they spit it out, right? Or they're like, oh God, and they have a reaction, right? Because they're not tough. You got to be tough to drink whiskey. And so, the softer characters we see have a big reaction to drinking whiskey, and then the tough characters are like, that's smooth, right? They have no reaction, right? So yeah, we have an alcohol that is harder, right? That is stronger, that is tougher, because of course men are supposed to be hard and strong and tough. Why else do we associate these foods with men? What do you think? There's a lot of meat here, is there not? Yeah. Why do we associate meat with men? Muscle?
So I guess.
You need protein. If you're gonna build muscle in the gym, you need protein. Okay, could be that. Could be that. Could be a very old kind of stereotype of man being the hunter. You know, when you go back to hunter-gatherer times, women are gathering, men are up. What's that?
Like Viking?
Like Vikings?
Yeah, like people hunting and.
Sure. Yeah, maybe, right? People running around with spears and bows and arrows, right? Hunting animals. Maybe a little bit of that as well. And we said that this extends all the way into other products like sort of personal hygiene and shower and shaving cream. There's shaving cream for men and there's shaving cream for women. Is it really different?
No.
No. My fiance and I have used each other's shaving cream. It doesn't make a difference, right? I think actually she likes mine better for her legs. I think mine actually works better for that, strangely enough. So, but that's the thing, right? Is that those are gendered products, right? And you find women's shave gel and men's shave gel, and the containers look different. But I mean, humans are humans, right? Is women's hair really different from men's hair? I don't think so, right? We all have different hair. Some of it's finer, some of it's more coarse, some is oilier, some is less oily, whatever. But it's all human hair, right? But again, we market it differently. We also, did I miss one? I must have deleted it by accident. Whoops. We also talked about the idea of cigarettes, right? And I'm sorry I don't have that ad to show you. I deleted it from my slides here. But we had those two cigarette ads, right? And we had the Camel guy who was on his motorcycle in his leather jacket, and the line was "where a man belongs," right? And he was sitting there smoking his cigarette, looking cool, because cigarettes are cool in the movies, not in real life. But then the woman's ad was totally different, right? We had this very elegant young woman dressed up to go out for a night on the town, jewelry, the whole thing. Good morning. Jewelry, the whole thing. And what kind of messages were we getting about women from that ad? Or what was the ad trying to tell us? Anna knows. Yeah, right. There was kind of another appeal to women kind of focusing on their appearance, right? And so here are these long, slim cigarettes, right? Women have long, slim fingers, and so they should smoke long, slim cigarettes. And of course, they're implying too that if you smoke these, you too will be long and slim, right? So they kind of, advertisers are very smart, right? They know what cultural stereotypes are, they know what gender norms are, and they kind of play to them, right? They know what men are supposed to be, and so advertisers work hard to give men products that help them be men, right? If you want to be a man, and there's all those ideas about, well, we did that assignment with the alien, right? There's all those ideas about what it means to be a man. Here's a product I'm trying to sell you, and if you buy it, it'll make you more of a man, right? That's basically what they're saying, right? And the same thing with women's products, right? They know what gender norms are, they know what it means to be a woman, and so here, I'm trying to sell you this thing, and if you buy it, it will make you more feminine and more womanly, right? And so which, you know, in some ways is a little ridiculous, but that's exactly what's happening here, right? Advertisers are using gender norms, they're using stereotypes to sell things to you, right? To convince you that if you buy this thing, it will make you more manly, right? If you're going to have a shower, you'll have a much manlier shower if you use that stuff rather than if you use that stuff. When of course in reality it really doesn't matter, right? Use what you want, but that's what they're trying to sell you, right? The other thing that's happening here that I wanted to talk about yesterday with the cigarettes is that what you would probably find is that you would probably find there was the Camel, right? The Camel Cigarettes with the guy, and the Virginia Slims with the woman. And what you would probably find is that there are women, or there were women out there that smoked Camel cigarettes. But I don't think you would find many men who would smoke Virginia Slims. And my question for you is, why would that be? Why would that be?
Because there are several types for which brand is also which brand user always demand of women.
Okay.
For example, if a guy who just smoke Virginia things, the other guy would wear kind of like that.
Okay, so it's true, right? So if, imagine, you know, a bunch of guys go out for a beer, pretend they're in a bar where you can smoke, which there aren't really that many anymore, I don't think, but pretend that's where this is, and, you know, a couple people pull out their cigarettes, and then one guy pulls out his Virginia Slims. What are the other guys gonna do? Oh, look at your cigarettes, miss, right? They're gonna make fun of him, right? When he orders a crantini or a appletini, what are they gonna do? They're gonna tease him, right? They're gonna mock his masculinity, right? He's not being very manly because he's ordering drinks or smoking cigarettes that are not associated with men. They're not marketed with men. But I ask you, what about, let's say in the movies when we see a woman drinking a whiskey or smoking a guy's cigarette? What is she?
She's badass.
She's badass, right? She's cool, right? And we see that, right? We see characters like that who are, you know, they're women, but they've kind of borrowed a few masculine things, right? Maybe a leather jacket, although leather jackets can go both ways, but maybe a more manly leather jacket. Maybe she's drinking whiskey. Maybe she's even smoking a cigar. That's a really manly thing to smoke, right? Is a cigar. And what do we think of her? We think of her as, oh, she's cool, right? Yeah, she's a tough chick, right? But why is it that way? Why does the man borrow something from the world of women and get ridiculed and teased? And why does the woman borrow something from the world of men and it's like, oh, she's cool? Why is it like that? Why isn't it the same for both? Because it does work that way, doesn't it? Kind of does, usually. Why? There's a bit of a double standard. Why?
Because a badass chick.
Yeah?
I guess that's rare. Maybe rare.
Because it's rare?
Uh-huh.
Yeah, maybe it's rare, but it's also similarly rare the guy who orders appletinis and smokes Virginia Slims. Similarly rare. What's happening here? Arena, what do you think?
It's connected with movies or something like this.
Say one more time?
Maybe it is connected with movies when some cool women they smoke cigars.
Ye-
It's in movies.
It's definitely connected to movies, right? And it's something we often see in movies, right? Because of course, people who make movies or television shows, they need to kind of tell the audience or show the audience who the character is, right? And again, if we see a woman sipping a very elegant drink, or if we see a woman pounding back a whiskey, that tells us a lot about who she is, right? Just without saying anything at all, we're like, okay. But
I think because we always see women like really soft,
right,
and men supposed to be tough.
yeah,
But instead you order the soft thing.
right,
Kind of embarrassing.
right.
I
So
think that's how the way.
right. So we have kind of two broad gender norms, right? Men are supposed to be hard, women are supposed to be soft and gentle, right? But who's the dominant group in society? Men or women? Men are the dominant group, right? And so as the dominant group, men are the ones who kind of get to say what is cool, right? Men are the ones who kind of have more status, right? They kind of have more power. And so when a woman comes along and, you know, she walks into a bar and she pours herself a whiskey and bangs it back, that's kind of a power move, right? And she's taken something from the powerful group in society and she's using it as her own. And when she does that, she gets a little bit of extra status as a result. She kind of gets to borrow a little masculine energy and masculine power, right? And again, I'm not saying that this is the way it should be. I'm just saying that this is kind of how socialization works, right? But it doesn't work the other way, right? Because for men, if they borrow something from the minoritized group, it makes them seem weaker, right? It makes them seem less manly. It makes them seem like not so much part of the dominant group. So it's kind of a loss of status for them, right? Nobody looks cool in a movie drinking a crantini, right? If they're a guy. If we see them drinking a fancy drink, we think, oh, okay, this is either a joke or maybe they're gay, right? That's often what happens, right? Men drink manly drinks, and if they're not drinking a manly drink, either they're gay or it's a joke, right? But women can drink a girly drink and it's fine, or they can drink a manly drink and have people think that they are a badass, right? And it works that way because, again, the two genders do not have equal power in society, right? Men have more power. They get to kind of define what is cool. And so when women borrow some of that stuff, they kind of appear cooler as well, right? In a particular way. But if men borrow from women, it doesn't quite work the same way. And there are exceptions to this, right? There are exceptions to this. Billy Porter, do we know who Billy Porter is? You can Google him later. Billy Porter, or right now if you want. But Billy Porter is a singer, I believe, but he's borrowed a lot from women's fashion. And so if you Google him, you'll see him come up and he's wearing like a tuxedo top, but then with a big like dress at the bottom. And he's kind of borrowed things from women's fashion and worn them pretty successfully, right? But that's tough to do. That's really tough to do.
It's crazy.
Yeah, right? That's pretty wild, right? Very wild. But not everybody can kind of do that, right? Not everyone can kind of pull that off like he can. So, yeah, borrowing from the dominant group kind of increases the status of someone in the minoritized group, right? They get a little boost, but it doesn't work the other way, right? And what this is showing us, what this is showing us is kind of, the direction of power, okay? Who has power in the society? Well, can you borrow from the other group and gain status, or do you lose status? If you lose, then the other group is the dominant one, right? Sorry. No, you're in the dominant group, right? If you borrow from the other group and it brings you down a bit, you're in the dominant group already. So, again, we see this in movies quite a bit. Pay attention to it, right? Pay attention to how women borrow from the world of men or men borrow from the world of women, and see how it's treated, right? And again, I think quite often the woman borrowing something masculine is meant to make her cool. The man borrowing from the world of women is meant to make him effeminate, right? Or gay, right? Think of Damien in Mean Girls, right? Remember when right at the beginning of the movie when Katie had to wear pink to hang out with the plastics, and Katie said, she said to Janice and Damien, "Do either of you have a pink shirt?" And Janice was like, "No," and Damien was like, "Of course." Right? Of course he had a pink shirt because he's gay, right? And so he kind of borrowed from the world of women with his pink shirt, but you know, it's associated with his gayness, right? So for this reason we'll often see women borrowing from the world of men, but men not really borrowing from the world of women, okay? Because it brings their status down, right? And when we see it in a movie, it's usually a joke, right? It's usually meant for humor. Now, speaking of movies, let's talk about them. Oh yeah. Gosh, I'm missing a few slides in here. Okay. I gotta fix my slides. They're all screwed up. Darn it. Okay. Movies is another place where stereotypes and gender norms are used to help tell a story, okay? And one of the ways that they're used to help us do this is by using familiar characters, okay? So, for example, here are some stock characters, right? Stock characters, if you remember from English, are just kind of very simple characters. They're kind of flat. They don't really have a lot of depth. There's just one or two things about them, and that's kind of their entire identity in the movie or in the television show, right? So here are some stock characters that we've all seen before, right? We've seen the absent-minded professor, right? Here's Doc Brown from Back to the Future. Anybody watch Rick and Morty? Yeah? Rick's the old guy, right? Yeah. Rick is an absent-minded professor, right? And we see this kind of guy a lot, right? Very intelligent, kind of an inventor, but a little weird. Yeah, a little weird. See him a lot. The angry black woman, right? We've seen her in many, many movies, right? Usually she's like judging people, like, oh no, he didn't, right? Usually she's doing that. The bad boy, right? Ugh, he's so beautiful, but if he could only be tamed, right? The anti-hero. See lots of anti-heroes nowadays, which is interesting, right? Because what's an anti-hero?
Dark background.
What's that?
Dark background hero.
Dark background hero? Avi, what were you gonna say? Yeah? Yeah, kind of a hero, but like, yeah, he's kind of a gray, it's a bit of a gray area, right? He doesn't always do the right thing. Sometimes he does some bad things, but we still know him to be a hero, right? And here's Wolverine, kind of a classic kind of Marvel anti-hero. Deadpool is a good one as well, right? Deadpool's an awful person, but still the hero of his story, right? A few others, right? The crazy cat lady, a stock character. The hot shot, right? The guy that's really, really good at what he does. Sometimes the girl too, but usually a guy. The damsel in distress, right? The woman who's usually in trouble and needs to be saved by the hero, right? The elderly martial arts master, right? We've seen him quite a bit. What's that? That's from Karate Kid. Earlier version, yeah. That's Mr. Miyagi. Yeah. But we've seen this guy before too, right? Kung Fu Panda. We have an elderly martial arts master. In Star Wars, we have Yoda, elderly martial arts master, right? These kind of characters come up over and over again, right? What's that?
What about Anakin?
Anakin? No, he's not. Well, I don't know. Is he a villain or an anti-hero? Or both? Kind of.
He a lot of good deeds too.
People, yeah, like Darth Vader is interesting because a lot of people think Darth Vader is cool in a way that, like, most people don't identify with the villain of the movie, right? There's no Voldemort fans out there, is there? Does anyone like Voldemort? No, right? You want to see Harry blast him kind of thing, right? Nobody likes Voldemort, but people kind of like Darth Vader for some reason. And so maybe he's kind of an anti-hero, even though he's a villain. I don't know. Interesting.
I don't know that concept.
Interesting. We see some other ones here. The nerd is a classic one. We'll talk about nerds a little bit later. Actually, let's talk about them now, because if someone is a nerd, is that like a good thing or a bad thing? If somebody like called you a nerd, would that be like upsetting or would it be like all right? Upsetting? Really? Yeah, nerd is an interesting term because nerds used to be like, you definitely didn't want to be a nerd, right? Nerds like this guy here. Nerds were very uncool. They were unsophisticated. They were not confident. They were usually had embarrassing or kind of childish hobbies. They were very not cool, right? But now it seems like nerds are a little more cool, right? It's okay to be into, like anime or Marvel or comic book stuff or Lord of the Rings or it's okay to be or into video games. It's okay to be into those things. It's okay to be really into those things, to do like cosplay and stuff like that. To really know how to use technology, that's kind of cool, right? So nerds are kind of like,
Mysterious.
well, it's kind of a gray area, right? They used to be super uncool, but now there's parts of being nerdy that are okay, right? So it's kind of depends, right? But once upon a time, nerds were super not cool. There's the villain, right? There's Voldemort there. We have the noble savage, right? So sometimes we see in movies or television, we see indigenous people portrayed as kind of like children of nature, right? They're very naive, they're very pure, they're at one with the animals, and it's not really true. It's not really like that. But we often see them portrayed this way. There's Pocahontas from a Disney princess. The jock, right? The football player. He's kind of dumb, plays football. He'll push you in the hallway, right? Yeah, he's kind of a bully, that kind of guy. You guys don't know the red shirt, do you?
No.
The red shirt. You'll see red shirts show up in other movies and films as well. This is from the original Star Trek in the 1960s. And so on the original Starship Enterprise, your rank, depending on your rank in Starfleet Command, you wore a different color shirt, right? So there's Captain Kirk. He's the captain, so he wears a gold shirt. All of the first officers, the really important people, they wear blue shirts like Mr. Spock in the background. He's wearing blue. And then kind of all the lower people wear red, right? And so, of course, when they beamed down to a planet to investigate it, you knew that, Captain Kirk and Mr. Spock were going to go down, and then they'd grab some random guy with a red shirt that you never saw before on the show. You're like, okay, he's not coming back. The aliens are going to eat him or whatever. So we've seen people like that in movies, right? The person that like, oh, this guy's going to die, right? He doesn't play a big role in the film. He just showed up and you're like, oh, the dinosaur is going to eat him or whatever, right? That's the red shirt. So there's lots of kind of stock characters, right? Characters that are used to very quickly establish who someone is. And from Mean Girls, we could probably think of Damien that way too, right? Damien's kind of a stock character. He's the gay best friend, right? And when we meet him at the beginning of the story, we kind of know everything we need to know about him in about 4 or 5 seconds, right? He's in the classroom and he grabs some of Katie's hair and he's like, "This is the color I want. Do you think this would look good on me?" You know? And she's like, "Oh, this is Damien. He's too gay to function," right? And basically right there, we know everything we need to know about Damien, right? He's a very stereotypical gay guy, right? And he doesn't really act any differently throughout the film. He's a very flat character, right? But again, he's not really the focus of the story, right? So he becomes kind of this flat stock character just so we know who he is very quickly, right? Because the story is about Regina and about Katie and all of that stuff and about Aaron Samuels. Oh, Aaron Samuels. The story is really about them, right? It's not really about Damien. And so the quicker we know who Damien is, the better, and we can move on. But of course, some groups kind of suffer from that, right? Because if we keep seeing them in a role that's very flat, we kind of start to absorb the stereotype, right? If we always see the gay best friend, we're like, "Oh, that's what gay people must be like." Because every time we see a gay person, that's how they act, right? Or the angry black woman, right? Every time we see a black woman in a movie and she's, "Oh, no, he didn't." And then we think, "Oh, I guess that must be what black people are like," right? And it's not true. And so that's kind of why it's important to make sure that we're telling stories about all kinds of different people, right? Not just about white people with, people of color or people of different genders or sexualities on the side, right? Because they inevitably get reduced, right? They inevitably turn out to be flat or stock characters. But we also have very familiar plots to movies. So a lot of movies have the same kind of story beats. Think about any romantic comedy fans? Romantic comedies. Favorite one?
A Walk to Remember?
Oh, Walk to Remember. That's a classic one. Mandy Moore?
Yeah.
Yep, that's a good one. Chen, what were you going to say? Favorite one?
It's an animated movie.
That's okay. Which one is it?
So I call it-
Or do I know it probably?
I'm not sure you know.
Okay. There's David. Favorite romantic comedy?
Titanic?
Which one?
Titanic.
Gomez?
What?
Titanic. Titanic.
I don't think I've seen that one. Have I?
Titanic.
Titanic.
Oh, Titanic. Actually, to be honest, I just saw that one this last year. I had never seen it. I'd never seen it before.
I've never seen it.
I finally. Yeah, but I was around when it was like in the theaters, right? And I have never seen it, and I finally saw it. Yeah, classic. But I don't know. Don't you think there was room on that thing with Rose for Jack? Don't you think he could have climbed up there too instead of like staying in the water? You don't know. I don't know. Anyway, yeah, classic films, right? And there's lots of them, right? That's kind of the nice thing about romantic comedies is that there are tons of them. I just saw one on the weekend called I Want You Back. I think it's on, is it Netflix or Amazon Prime? Okay, anyway, there's lots of them, tons of them. But often what you find is that a lot of them have very similar plot lines. Okay, so tell me if this sounds familiar. Okay. The main character is often kind of a young woman. She's very pretty, of course, but she's often very busy with her life, right? Sometimes she's taking care of her a family member, right? Maybe an aging father or something like that. Maybe she's very career oriented, right? She's super into her career and she's very good at her career. And she's actually kind of got a great life, right? She's got friends, her career's going well, she's got good family around her. Seems to be okay, but her friends kind of start nudging her, right? They're like, oh, why don't you go out, right? Why don't you ever fix yourself up? You're so beautiful, right? Why don't you find a man, right? Because even though, no matter how great this woman's life is, the movie will kind of start to convince us that, oh, her life is missing something, right? Something's missing, right? Her life would be complete if only she found the guy, right? And of course she meets that guy at some point in the movie, but of course usually she doesn't realize it right away, right? She meets him and it's just, maybe it's like an awkward meeting and nothing happens, right? Or maybe she meets him and she really doesn't like him. She thinks he's a total doofus, right? Or something like that. But of course he falls in love with her, right? He knows that she's the one, and he has to somehow kind of convince her. And so often, he's asking her out on dates. Sometimes he's making the grand romantic gesture, right? Singing to her or doing something wild and very embarrassing, right? And so he's trying to convince her that he is the guy for her, right? Again, her friends are trying to push her in this direction too, saying, you need to find your Prince Charming, right? You need to, that something's missing, right? That her life is incomplete without this guy, right? And so almost what has to happen here is that this Prince Charming, if I may, this guy, he almost has to break her from her coma, right? So very much like the classic fairy tale of Sleeping Beauty, she's kind of asleep, right? She's going through her life, she's, seeing her friends, taking care of her family, walking her dogs, working her job, and she just doesn't realize that something's missing, right? The guy is missing. And so he kind of needs to come along and kiss her, maybe metaphorically or maybe actually, literally, to kind of wake her up, right? To show that, oh yeah, this is the guy, right? This is what's missing from my life, right? This is kind of how these things go, right? Often. Which, in some ways, is kind of weird, don't you think? Now, it's a very typical romantic comedy plot. We've seen this movie a bunch of times with different details and different actors and actresses. But I think there's a few things that are weird. So, number one, she has a really good life beforehand, right? And she thinks that everything's good and she's happy, but everyone around her tells her that she's wrong, right? Which is okay, sometimes that happens. But by the end of the movie, is she right or is everyone else right? Was she right that her life was fine all along, or is it like, oh no, my life was missing this guy? Yeah, right? My life was incomplete, right? Until I had this guy, and now everything is better, right? And the guy usually knows it too, and often the guy knows it first, right? The guy sees the girl and he's like, oh my God, she's the one for me, right? But the girl is kind of like, he's okay in a weird sort of way, I guess, right? And so he kind of has to convince her that he's the one. And again, at the end of the movie, he's right? He's right. She was the one. But I think that's a little bit strange because this is usually her movie, right? Whoever it is, if it's Rachel McAdams or Katherine Heigl or Mandy Moore or Kate Beckinsale or whoever it is, whoever the female lead is, it's kind of her movie. But what we find is that her perspective is kind of, it's made not legitimate, right? Her point of view was wrong. She's wrong in her own movie. Everyone else is right. In particular, the man is right. The man is right that they belong together, right? And so I think that's kind of strange to take someone in a film who, intelligent, accomplished, woman with pretty much their life together, more or less, as much as anyone can. And yet, the movie tells us, oh, but she's wrong. She doesn't know what she wants, right? She doesn't know what she needs. She needs a guy and she doesn't realize it. She needs that guy and she doesn't realize it. And so the movie and the friends and the guy himself work very hard to convince her that, yeah, she's wrong, right? She thought she had a great life. Nope. You need the guy, right? And I'm not saying that there's anything wrong with having a guy or even wanting one, right? Some people very much want someone in their lives, and that's great, right? But I do think it's interesting that her thoughts are not really valued here, right? She knows what she wants. She's an accomplished, intelligent woman. She's fine with her life right now. She doesn't really want to be dating someone. And yet everyone's like, no, you're wrong, right? As a bit of a tangent, I find this image and this fairy tale very interesting as well, because there's no consent here, right? He's going to kiss her, but does he have her permission? No, she's in a coma, right? She's asleep forever and ever, right? And so he's going to wake her up with his kiss, and I think if I remember the fairy tale, when she wakes up, she's going to fall in love with him, right? Yeah. Lucky he's a hot prince, right? He is wearing that cape, right? He's a good-looking guy. But imagine if he was some, hideous moron. Then he kissed her and she woke up and fell in love with this hideous moron. That'd be awful, right? So, but here again, she doesn't really have any agency, right? She doesn't really have any choice. She's just sitting there, and then the guy kisses her and she's like, oh, okay, I love you. That's kind of a weird message, isn't it? Yeah, is she supposed to just magically fall in love with this guy because he kissed her? And kissed her against her will? She didn't actually necessarily want him to kiss her. This is a weird fairy tale, right? There are some strange messages here.
At least everyone like it.
What's that?
At least everyone like it.
Everyone likes the fairy tale?
Yeah.
Well, maybe. But sometimes you got to think about these things, right? We all know the story, or most of us know the story, and sometimes we know it so well that we don't think about it. But I think there's some problematic messages in this fairy tale, right? Why is it all up to him, right? She just lies there, and he comes in and kisses her, and now she's in love with him? She doesn't know this guy. Why should she fall in love with him just because he kissed her? Against her will. Yeah, that's weird, right? But I kind of think that maybe some of the messages I think some of the messages in these chick flicks or romantic comedies, I think they're kind of weird as well, right? The idea that women are incomplete without a man. And you might say, well, come on, Mike, these movies are just for fun, and they are fun. They're fun to watch, right? I like watching them too. And, it's just a movie, right? It's just a simple story, and it is. But are there romantic comedies where the man is the central character? Where the man's got his life together, he's really happy, really successful, things are going well, happens to be single, and all of his guy friends are going, dude, you've got to get married. You've got to find the one, right? You've got, what did you say? You never seen that. No, you have never seen that, right? Usually what we see is guys encouraging other guys to go out and hook up with as many women as they can, right? That's the Well, you laugh, but is that true? That's kind of what we see, right? So these romantic comedy things might not be quite as problematic if both genders were getting them, right? If there were movies where, girlfriend, you really need to go and find yourself a husband, and then you had movies where it was like, dude, you really need to find yourself a wife. You need to settle down. It's time. Let's find the one. There's no movies like that. Right? Those movies are kind of centered on women, right? And so women are kind of socialized, if you will, or there's social messages in these movies that, yeah, they need to be looking for the one. They need to go out there and find the guy. Guys, on the other hand, are getting messages to go out there and hook up with as many women as you can possibly find, right? That's the message they're getting. And that's kind of interesting, right? Interesting that these genders are getting two different messages, right? All right, let's take a break here because we've been working hard for an hour. When you come back, talk a little bit more about movies, and then I think I have a video to show you which you might find very interesting. Although it might ruin something for you as well, but not a big deal. Okay. Okay, so the idea here, what I'm trying to get across is that movies and television, just like advertising, they tend to use gender norms, messages that we've been kind of socialized into, and stereotypes in order to help tell us a story. And so in the process, they don't mean to, but often what they do is that they kind of perpetuate or they continue stereotypes, gender norms, and sexist relationships, right? Double standards that we have in society where men and women have different expectations, right? Those things are kind of carried forward by media because often they're just trying to tell us a simple story, right? They're not trying to challenge socialization so much, although nowadays they're starting to. But the other thing I wanted to point out to you that's kind of interesting in this regard is something called the Bechdel test. Okay, and the Bechdel test it actually came out of a comic strip in the 1980s, and it was a comic strip about lesbian women. It was called Dykes to Watch Out For. And so in one little comic strip, there were these two women going to a movie, and they were trying to choose which movie to watch. And one character goes to the other. She's like, I only go to movies that pass these three criteria. There has to be at least two women in the movie, two female characters. They have to talk to each other, and they have to talk to each other about something other than the guy or guys. That's the test. Okay? Two women characters. Usually they say they have to have actual names. Okay, so named characters in a movie. They talk to each other, these two women, and they talk to each other about something other than the man. Now my question for you is, how many movies do you think actually pass that test?
Quite
You think a lot of them pass? Okay, let's what in percentage wise, how many movies do you think pass all three? Two women characters talk to each other about something other than the guy. Chen, what do you think, percent wise? Percent. 75? Okay, Avi, what do you think?
40.
40? Okay. Bosco, what do you think? Give me a percent. 40? Okay. Rena? 60? Okay. David? 50? Crazio? 50? Mir? 40. Anna? 40? Those are some very low estimates, right? With the exception of maybe 75. Everyone thinks that about half or even less than half of movies do not have two female characters who talk to each other about something other than a woman. Doesn't that strike you as bizarre? You guys are guessing really low, but you're also guessing very accurately. Shoot. What happened to all my slides? I got to go back and figure this out. I had a few slides in there with actual statistics, but in fact, you are correct. I'll put them in there for tomorrow. I apologize. I don't know what's going on today. A shocking number of films do not pass this very simple test, right? And not only that, but a lot of the films that do pass, they only pass because the women are talking about marriage or babies. So they're not necessarily talking about the guy, they're talking about marriage and babies. Now, ladies who are in the room here, do you two talk about things other than guys? You do? You have other things to talk about than us guys? Wow. That's surprising because in every movie I've seen, that's all women talk about is the guy. But wow, this is quite shocking to me that women actually talk about things other than guys. I'm being ridiculous, of course. But isn't that kind of surprising? that in so many movies, women are kind of relegated to only, they're kind of only there to talk about the guy, or to fall in love with the guy, or to be rescued by the guy, or to be, pursued by the guy, right? And seemingly all they really talk about is that guy, or marriage, or babies. It seems kind of like a one-dimensional portrayal, right? Because men have all kinds of different things to talk about in films, don't they? Right? They talk about sports and politics. Sometimes they talk about girls. Sometimes they talk about whiskey, or the boat they're restoring, or their cars, or travel, or ancient artifacts, or aliens, or whatever the story, dinosaurs, whatever the movie is about. Men have a lot to talk about, but it's very interesting that it seems like women don't. Which is ridiculous, because we know that women, of course, do have a lot to talk about, but it's very interesting that we don't see that in movies, right? Why do you think that is? Why are women only talking about a few things in movies? There's a deceptively simple answer to this.
It's more interesting.
Give me more. What's more interesting, and to whom?
To the people who are watching that.
Okay, so it's more interesting to the people who are watching the movies if women only talk about guys and marriage and babies?
Yeah.
Let's go to the females here. Irina and Anna, sorry, I'm going to put you on the spot, and Cleo too, if you're listening there. Is it more interesting for you to watch movies where women only talk about three things, which are basically just one thing? That's not interesting? Not interesting? Huh, okay. So, in one way, you're wrong, right? Although, clearly, Irina and Anna don't speak for all women. But in another way, maybe you're right. Now, who might it be interesting to have women only talking about those three things? Men? Okay, that's interesting. So, Anna, are you implying that many movies out there are kind of made by and for men?
Yeah, I mean, they're the dominant.
They are the dominant group, right? Would you say more film directors are men or women?
Men.
Right, by a pretty substantial margin, right? There are some women directors out there, but they are definitely a minority, right? Men are mostly the directors, the writers, the producers even. And so this is kind of interesting because it seems like most of the stories that are being told out there are being told by men, but they're also being told for men, right? People are being portrayed in a way that men think are interesting. And sorry, Avi, I'm not picking on you here, but this is true, right? That movies are kind of presented in a way that is kind of pleasing to the male ego, right? It's pleasing to the way men look at things. But as Irina and Anna pointed out, that yeah, this is not really interesting to just hear women talk about the same thing, right? Women have a lot more to talk about than that, which we of course know. But it's very interesting that movies don't show us that. Very interesting. And I will admit, of course, that movies are getting better now, right? We're seeing a little more diversity. We're seeing different kinds of stories. So I think this is improving because people are aware of stuff like this. But certainly in the past, it was an issue, right? Okay. Let me jump. Okay. This is what I'd like to show you. Hopefully we have enough time for this. I want to talk quickly about misogyny, okay? So misogyny, just to give you a quick definition, is basically a prejudice against women, right? So if you're anti-Semitic, you have a prejudice against Jewish people, right? If you are a misogynist, you have a prejudice against women, a negative prejudice, right? And often we see people acting out their misogyny, acting out their prejudice by doing all these things, right? By excluding women from various things, right? You've heard of situations that are boys' clubs, right? Because women have been excluded. Hostility or kind of a focus on men, patriarchy, right? Making sure that men are always in power, ideas about male privilege, sort of violence against women or crude jokes or comments or whatever. All of that is kind of in the realm of misogynistic behavior, okay? And again, we can find misogyny everywhere, all the way from ancient religion to mythology to religious text to philosophy to academics to social media to movies and to television. There's misogyny everywhere. And so to show you that, I wanted to look at this. Anyone watch this show? Or heard of it? Heard of it?
Yeah.
Okay. Big Bang Theory here in North America, very popular show. It's over now, but I think it ran for 9 or 10 seasons or something. Very popular. You can find it on, I think, one of the streaming platforms. They'll be showing it on TV until we're all dead. It was very popular, okay? But what's interesting about it is that there's quite a bit of misogyny built into how women are kind of portrayed and treated in the show. And so what I want to do is I want to show you this video here, and I want you to keep track of these two things, okay? Keep track of the social messages that are being transmitted about women and what's being laughed at and why, okay? And so hopefully we'll be able to remember this for tomorrow, or at least I'm crossing my fingers that we will. But let's watch it. And so where is the link? Here's the link. I'm going to put it in. I'm going to put in the live chat for Cleo, and then let's watch it. So we'll just have enough time to. We'll just have enough time to do this, and then we'll talk about the answers tomorrow. So try to pay attention enough so that you remember what we're doing, okay?